He wore a collar that could kill him with 12 different toxins. The Watchers called it control. But when a green-skinned child begged him to save her mother under an alien moon, Kane faced a choice no weapon should ever have to make. Could he break his chains for a stranger's plea? Or would the poison claim him first? The collar sat cold against his neck. 12 microchambers formed a perfect circle beneath the metal surface. Each held a different neurotoxin. The first caused muscle paralysis, the second respiratory failure, the third cardiac arrest. The sequence continued through 12 distinct ways to die. Watcher engineers designed it as a psychological masterpiece. They didn't just want obedience, they wanted to eliminate the very idea of resistance. The collar made hope irrational. Survival required accepting your captivity. Each hunter became their own jailer, maintaining the system that enslaved them. Kane had seen 3 removal attempts. The first man died twitching on the barracks floor, his fingers still hooked under the collar's edge. The second lasted 8 minutes, each toxin hitting like a timed blow. The third tried to cut it off with a laser cutter. The resulting explosion took out 2 adjacent bunks. Their deaths served as perfect demonstrations. The message was clear. The system offered no exits. Yet the collar's perfection contained its first mistake. The Watchers assumed human behavior followed predictable patterns. They calculated that self-preservation would always override moral impulses. Their models couldn't factor in desperation's creativity or a father's memory surfacing through chemical conditioning. The weekly antidote ritual reinforced the control. Hunters lined up for their injections, each dose neutralizing that week's cumulative poison. It wasn't medicine. It was a reset button on a 7-day death clock. Missing a dose meant certain painful death. Receiving it meant another week of serving the ones who held your life in their hands. Kane had studied the collar during long nights in his bunk. His enhanced vision could detect the microscopic seams between chambers. He noted the precise pressure points where the mechanisms engaged. The design was flawless engineering, but it required perfect conditions to function as intended. The Watchers never considered what might happen if someone didn't care about the consequences. They didn't plan for the moment when continued survival became a worse option than probable death. Their system failed to account for the human capacity to choose principles over preservation. That structural oversight would matter when the green child approached him. Her small voice would bypass years of conditioning, activating something the toxins couldn't touch. The collar's 12 poisons were designed against rebellion, but not against redemption. He sometimes pressed 2 fingers against the cold metal, feeling the faint hum of active systems. The vibration represented perfect control, absolute authority. But beneath that certainty lay the quiet truth. Any system designed by beings who didn't understand humanity would always contain blind spots. Kane remembered Earth in flashes. Green grass, his daughter's laughter, the weight of his wedding ring. These memories surfaced between tactical data streams, brief interruptions in his enhanced consciousness. The Watchers' invasion didn't just conquer territory. It dismantled human identity piece by piece. Their approach was methodical. They targeted emotional bonds first. Kane watched them take Sarah and Ellie during the initial containment phase. Their precision was clinical, not chaotic. They didn't kill his family. They cataloged and extracted them. This wasn't random violence. It was strategic dismantling of resistance through calculated loss. The enhancement process followed capture. Watcher scientists injected him with neural rewiring agents. The chemicals altered his brain chemistry, suppressing emotional centers and amplifying tactical processing. Grief became data. Love transformed into threat assessment algorithms. His humanity was systematically overwritten with efficiency. His augmented eyes now detected thermal signatures at 300 meters. He could calculate trajectories, identify weaknesses, assess threats in milliseconds. Where he once saw his daughter's smile, he now saw vulnerability points and defensive postures. The Watchers built the perfect hunter from the ruins of a broken father. They believed the transformation was complete. The emotional suppression felt permanent during training exercises and combat drills. He followed orders without hesitation. He tracked targets without remorse. The machine they created operated with flawless precision, exactly as designed. But memory persisted in the neural substrate beneath the augmentations. The chemical conditioning couldn't erase everything. Certain triggers bypassed the programming. the smell of rain on dry earth, the particular way a child might tilt their head, the sound of desperate pleading. These sensory inputs accessed pathways the watchers never found. His handlers monitored physiological responses, not emotional ones. They tracked heart rate, adrenaline levels, neural activity patterns. They missed the subtle reactivation of dormant connections. The foundation of who he'd been remained intact beneath the artificial layers. During night cycles, fragmented dreams surfaced. Not full memories, but sensory echoes. The feel of small fingers gripping his, the particular blue of his wife's eyes, the weight of a child sleeping on his chest. These moments lasted nanoseconds before suppression systems engaged, but they left residual impressions. The watchers assumed complete control because they monitored what they understood: biological responses, not human experience. They could measure cortisol levels but not recognize the significance of a father's remembered promise. They could track synaptic activity but not interpret the meaning behind a recovered moment of tenderness. This oversight became their critical vulnerability. They built their weapon on a foundation they never fully erased. The man beneath the enhancements remained present, waiting for the right trigger. When the Emerald Child approached him, she didn't activate his training protocols. She reached something deeper, something older, something the Watchers never accounted for in their perfect system of control. The collision between his programming and his residual humanity created cognitive dissonance the Watchers never anticipated. Their systems were designed to handle rebellion, not redemption. They prepared for resistance, not for the reactivation of buried paternal instincts. The very emotional connections they tried to erase became the flaw in their perfect weapon. She stepped from the purple foliage without any attempt at concealment. Natives never approached hunters directly. Protocol dictated immediate detention or elimination of unauthorized contacts. Kane's hand moved toward his stun rod on pure instinct. Then he registered her size. She was a child. Her skin emitted a soft emerald luminescence under the twin moons. The light made her seem both ethereal and heartbreakingly solid. She stood barely waist-high to him, her large eyes holding no trace of the fear his presence usually inspired. She didn't look at his weapon, his armor, or the collar at his throat. She looked directly at his face. "Please," she said. Her voice carried the same tremor his daughters had on that last day. "They took my mother." The metal men put her in a flying box. "They are hurting her." The words sliced through his conditioning like a hot knife. Neural inhibitors flickered but couldn't block the assault. Her plea wasn't just sound, it was a key turning in a lock he thought was sealed forever. His tactical display automatically assessed her as a non-threat. His enhancement pack provided data on her species, estimated age, potential diplomatic complications. It calculated the risk of interaction against the certainty of punishment for breaking protocol. The numbers were clear. Engagement meant violation. Violation meant collar activation. The equation offered only two outcomes: his death or her abandonment. Nearby, hover drones swept their red scanning beams in lazy arcs. Their patterns were predictable, designed for efficiency, not for catching moments of moral choice. They would report the interaction if they detected it. The system assumed he would follow his training. It never considered he might not want to. The child, Mira, he would learn, did something the Watchers never anticipated. She trusted him, not the enhanced hunter but the man beneath. She saw through the armor and augmentations to the residual humanity. The conditioning failed to erase. Her innocence bypassed every security protocol. She presented a problem no algorithm could solve. Kane felt the cold weight of the collar against his skin. He knew the precise sequence of agony that awaited disobedience. He had memorized the autopsy reports of those who tried to resist. His fingers tingled with the phantom pain of neurotoxins entering his bloodstream. The rational choice was to stun her and report the contact. Survival demanded it, but her eyes held no calculation, only raw need. They reflected not what he was, but what he had been. A father, a protector, a man who once promised his own child he would always keep her safe. That promise, buried under layers of chemical obedience, now resonated with a stranger's plea. The hover drone's beam swept closer. Time compressed into this single decision point. He could maintain his existence as a controlled weapon, or he could embrace the certain death that came with defiance. There was no middle ground, no negotiated outcome. The system allowed no compromises. He looked at Mira's small glowing face and made the choice the Watchers believed was impossible. He chose probable death over certain moral failure. In that moment, the weapon they created began dismantling itself from the inside out, triggered not by rebellion, but by recognition. Kane's fingers found the hidden catch. He'd practiced this movement in darkness for months. His left hand maintained precise pressure just below his jawline. His right index finger located the almost invisible seam. The manual override required perfect coordination. 3 pounds of pressure held for exactly 2 seconds. Any deviation would trigger the full toxin release sequence. Mira watched him, her emerald glow casting faint light on his hands. The hover drone's scanning beam swept toward their position. He had 8 seconds before detection. His training screamed at him to stop. Every instinct warned of the consequences. His muscles remembered the twitching deaths he'd witnessed. He applied the pressure. The catch resisted at first, then gave slightly. A soft hum vibrated through the collar. Internal mechanisms shifted. The sound was barely audible, but to Kane it echoed like a weapon discharge. His enhanced hearing picked up the microscopic clicks as chambers realigned. "What are you doing?" Mira whispered. Her voice held no fear, only curiosity. "Making a choice," he said. The words felt alien in his mouth. They weren't part of any Watcher-approved dialogue. They represented a thought process outside his programming. The final click came exactly as calculated. But something was wrong. The collar didn't release fully. It remained locked around his neck, though the pressure changed. His internal diagnostics showed 11 chambers now active instead of 12. One toxin reservoir had somehow neutralized. This wasn't freedom. It was a modified death sentence. Instead of instant annihilation, he now faced slow poisoning. The remaining 11 toxins would leak into his system gradually. His enhanced metabolism would fight them, but eventually they would win. He'd traded certain immediate death for probable slow extinction. The choice defied every Watcher assumption about human behavior. Their models predicted self-preservation would always dominate. They never accounted for someone choosing principle over survival. Kane's action wasn't about hoping to live. It was about refusing to continue as their instrument. His fingers remained on the collar, feeling the subtle vibration change. The system was compromised but still active. He'd introduced an error into perfect machinery. The Watchers designed the collar to handle rebellion, not this quiet subversion of its fundamental purpose. Mira reached toward his hand. Her small green fingers hovered near the metal band. "Did it work?" she asked. "Partially," he said. The word carried more meaning than he intended. He hadn't achieved freedom, but he'd claimed something more valuable. Autonomy. The right to choose his own path, even if that path led to death. The hover drone passed without detecting them. Its red beam swept harmlessly overhead. Kane's action had created a data anomaly the Watchers wouldn't immediately recognize. Their systems would show his collar as still functional. They wouldn't notice the subtle change in its operation until much later. He stood, the collar feeling both lighter and heavier than before. The constant threat of instant death was gone, replaced by the certainty of gradual decline. But he'd regained ownership of his remaining time. However brief it might be, those moments would be his to control. The choice wasn't heroic. It was mathematical. He'd calculated that a shortened life on his own terms was preferable to indefinite servitude. The Watchers could engineer perfect control systems, but they couldn't engineer the human will to resist domination. That remained unpredictable, unquantifiable, and ultimately unconquerable. The purple forest swallowed them whole. Towering fungi glowed with soft light, casting shifting patterns across the undergrowth. Every shadow seemed to move. Kane's enhanced vision detected thermal signatures that flickered and vanished. The environment played tricks on senses designed for urban combat, not alien wilderness. Luminescent moss covered the ground like a carpet of faint stars. It provided enough light to navigate but created constant visual noise. His targeting system struggled to distinguish between biological glow and scanner beams. The forest breathed with sounds he couldn't classify. A crackling branch might be a predator's step or just fibrous growth expanding in the night air. Mira moved through the purple foliage without hesitation. Her small form slipped between hanging vines and through narrow passages invisible to Kane's tactical analysis. She understood this environment on an instinctual level. When she paused, he learned to pause. When she changed direction abruptly, he followed without question. Her silent guidance became their primary navigation system. Lyra's survival knowledge provided practical counterpoints to Kane's combat training. She identified edible fungi that grew near glowing rocks. She found water sources by tracking particular moss patterns. Her observations came from years of studying alien biology alongside her husband, the healer. She understood how ecosystems functioned rather than how to dominate them. Kane's Watcher-enhanced senses now served their escape instead of their captors. He could detect drone patrol patterns from kilometers away. His auditory implants picked up the faint hum of scanning technology through layers of vegetation. The tools designed to control him became instruments of evasion. Every piece of tactical data now fueled their rebellion rather than their subjugation. The forest operated on biological principles unfamiliar to Earth-evolved humans. Plants communicated through root networks, creating information streams they couldn't access. Predators used scent markers that didn't register on his scanners. Weather patterns followed atmospheric rules that made no logical sense. They were guests in a system that didn't accommodate their existence. Their cooperation created unexpected advantages. Kane's tactical awareness combined with Lyra's ecological knowledge and Mira's innate understanding of the terrain. They moved as a single unit, each compensating for the other's limitations. This distributed intelligence proved superior to the Watchers' centralized command structure. The Watchers' assumed control came from technology and hierarchy. They never considered that adaptability might defeat both. Their systems were designed to handle predictable resistance, not this organic, evolving response. The forest itself became their ally, offering concealment and confusing their pursuers' sensors. Kane felt the collar's slow poison working through his system. A faint tremor had started in his left hand. His enhanced metabolism fought the toxins, but the battle was gradual and draining. The physical decline forced him to rely more on strategy than strength. He made calculations based on conservation of energy rather than overwhelming force. They learned to read the forest's subtle warnings. A sudden silence in insect chatter might mean approaching danger. Particular bird calls indicated safe zones ahead. The environment provided constant data if they knew how to interpret it. Their survival depended on listening rather than commanding. The Watchers hunted them with perfect technology and incomplete understanding. They scanned for heat signatures but missed the forest's thermal variations. They tracked movement but couldn't distinguish between animal activity and human passage. Their arrogance about controlling nature became their critical weakness. In the purple forest, the hunted had to become part of the ecosystem. Success meant adapting to alien rules rather than imposing familiar ones. Each step deeper into the wilderness took them further from Watcher control and closer to understanding how to truly disappear. The raptors moved as fluidly as any Watcher patrol. Their four-legged coordination created seamless hunting patterns. Each pack member anticipated the other's movements with frightening precision. They didn't just chase prey, they directed it toward ambush points using subtle positioning changes. This tactical intelligence matched anything the Watchers engineered. Their hunting methods created problems for centralized control systems. Watcher drones tracked predictable patrol routes. The raptors moved according to environmental opportunities, not fixed patterns. Their presence introduced chaos into carefully monitored territories. The Watchers' surveillance nets couldn't categorize their behavior effectively. Kane used their unpredictability to his advantage. He modified defensive tactics from his training manuals. Instead of seeking cover, he positioned himself where raptor activity would mask his heat signature. He learned to recognize their territorial markings, particular scratch patterns on tree bark, specific scent markers invisible to human senses. These became his early warning system. The night hunters presented a different challenge entirely. 6 limbs gave them unusual mobility through dense undergrowth. Their eyes reflected blue moonlight in unsettling patterns. They hunted using sound and vibration more than sight, making stealth almost impossible against them. One caught Kane's arm during a river crossing. Its claws sliced through his reinforced sleeve with disturbing ease. The wound bled with an odd luminescence under the twin moons. The blue glow marked him for other predators throughout the night. Lyra used crushed moss to staunch the bleeding, but the scent remained. These encounters revealed the planet's inherent resistance to control. The Watchers assumed they could dominate any environment through technology. They didn't account for ecosystems that evolved complex interdependencies. Every species had adaptations that countered their scanning methods and containment strategies. Kane's improvised defenses used terrain features absent from training simulations. He positioned their camp near thermal vents that masked their body heat. He used raptor scratching posts as natural alarm systems. He learned which plants emitted frequencies that confused drone sensors. His survival depended on understanding rather than overpowering his environment. The Night Hunter attack changed their movement patterns. Kane's bleeding arm forced slower progress. The constant threat of attracting more predators made open travel dangerous. They moved through underground fungal networks instead, using bioluminescence for navigation. The Watchers never scanned these tunnels thoroughly. They considered them insignificant. Raptor packs became unintended allies. Their hunting activities provided distraction during critical moments. When Watcher patrols swept through areas, the Raptors' chaotic movements often drew attention away from hidden fugitives. Kane learned to time their movements with predator activity cycles. The planet itself seemed to resist domination. Weather patterns shifted to foil aerial surveillance. Geological formations created sensor shadows perfect for concealment. Native species behaviors interfered with automated systems. The Watcher's assumption of total environmental control proved dangerously arrogant. Kane's wound continued bleeding blue under moonlight for 3 nights. The strange luminescence actually helped them avoid other night hunters. The creatures seemed to recognize it as belonging to another predator's territory. What initially seemed like a death sentence became temporary protection. Their survival increasingly depended on working with natural systems rather than against them. The Watchers tried to force order upon chaos. The fugitives learned to move within that chaos, using its patterns as both shield and weapon. Native predators weren't just threats. They were components in an ecosystem that naturally resisted control. Lyra stopped at the cave entrance, her hand tracing shapes carved into the stone. "These are ancient," she said. "Naru ritual markers. My people believe they bring luck to those who follow the path." The carvings formed interlocking geometric patterns that seemed to shift in the dim light. They weren't random scratches, they held intentional meaning. The symbols created a spatial language. Triangular clusters indicated direction. Circular patterns with internal lines showed distance. Jagged edges warned of danger zones. The markers formed a complete navigation system etched into the planet itself. This wasn't just art, it was a survival guide created generations before Watcher occupation. Their escape transformed in that moment. They weren't pioneers cutting a new path through wilderness. They were following routes established long before humans arrived on this world. The realization shifted their mental framework from desperate flight to purposeful navigation. They had joined a much older story of resistance. The markers suggested organized opposition existed before the first human collar was ever fitted. The Watchers presented themselves as eternal rulers, but these carvings told a different history. Their control might be newer, more fragile than they claimed. The symbols represented continuity against attempted erasure. Interpreting the markers required understanding alien cultural context. Lyra explained that Naru tradition valued indirect communication. The symbols worked through suggestion rather than direct statement. A spiral might mean water nearby, but also approach with caution. The meanings layered multiple warnings and guidance into single shapes. Each successful interpretation built confidence. When a marker indicated a hidden spring behind a rockfall, and they found it exactly where predicted, trust in the system grew. When jagged symbols warned of predator nesting grounds, and they encountered raptor tracks minutes later, the markers proved reliable. The ancient knowledge compensated for their lack of modern technology. The cave network revealed more markers at regular intervals. They formed a connected system stretching deep underground. Some appeared freshly maintained, suggesting current use. The Watchers either didn't know about these passages or considered them insignificant. Their surveillance focused on open terrain and electronic communication, not stone carvings in forgotten caves. Following the markers required adapting to Naru Si Wei Fang Shi. They moved according to environmental cues rather than distance or time. A particular moss growth pattern might indicate the next marker's location. Bird calls at dawn could signal safe passage times. The system integrated completely with natural rhythms. The ancient path offered more than physical guidance. It provided psychological reinforcement. They weren't alone in resisting the Watchers. Generations had faced similar threats and left tools for those who would follow. The markers represented accumulated wisdom against oppression. Kane's tactical mind appreciated the efficiency. The symbols conveyed complex information without technology that could be detected or hacked. They used the environment itself as communication medium. This low-tech approach circumvented Watcher surveillance completely. The markers sometimes presented puzzles. A sequence might show conflicting warnings and encouragements. Lyra explained that Naru wisdom acknowledged life's complexities. Safe paths often contained risks. Dangerous routes sometimes offered the only forward progress. They learned to read the balance rather than seek absolute safety. Their progress accelerated with the marker's guidance. They avoided dead ends that would have cost hours of backtracking. They found sheltered resting spots exactly when needed. The ancient system seemed to anticipate a traveler's needs through careful observation of the land itself. The Watcher's control relied on overwhelming force and technology. The markers represented a different power: patience, observation, and integration with natural systems. One approach tried to dominate the environment. The other worked with it. In their current situation, the quieter approach proved more effective. Mira traced the carvings with her small fingers. She recognized some symbols from stories her mother had told. The markers connected her to cultural knowledge she thought was lost. Her understanding combined with Lyra's explanations to create a more complete picture. They were no longer just running, they were following. The distinction mattered psychologically. Instead of being chased, they were being guided. The change in perspective affected how they moved, how they rested, how they planned. Purpose replaced panic in their daily routines. The ancient network offered something the Watchers could never provide: a sense of belonging to something larger than themselves. Their struggle wasn't isolated. It was part of an ongoing resistance that predated their arrival and would continue after them. The markers were a reminder that control is always temporary, but the will to resist endures. The blue-green crystals powered everything in the Watcher system. Their energy pulsed through hunter collars, drone propulsion systems, and containment fields. The Watchers mined them in massive open pits, processing them for maximum energy yield. They saw the crystals as simple power sources, efficient, predictable, and perfect for maintaining control. Lyra carried fragments of her husband's research in a sealed pouch. Tar had studied the crystals before his disappearance. His notes, written in medical shorthand, suggested the minerals held properties the Watchers never investigated. He believed their energy emission patterns could stimulate tissue regeneration under specific conditions. The Watchers dismissed his work as unscientific speculation. The crystals emitted a low-frequency vibration, detectable only through specialized equipment. Tar had documented how this resonance affected cell growth in laboratory specimens. His experiments showed accelerated healing in subjects exposed to precisely fractured crystal fragments. The Watchers' research focused solely on energy output, not biological interaction. In underground rivers, the crystals created natural navigation aids. Their refractive properties split light into precise spectral patterns. Certain angles produced consistent markers that could guide travelers through darkness. The Watchers never studied these optical effects. They considered them irrelevant to power generation. Lyra could interpret some of Tar's symbols. She recognized the shorthand for cellular response and resonance frequency. His notes indicated that properly prepared crystal fragments might counteract certain neurotoxins. The research remained theoretical, interrupted before practical application. The crystal's presence indicated geological stability. Areas with surface deposits often contained cave systems with reinforced structures. These formations provided natural shelter from Watcher scanning technology. The miners stripped surface layers but rarely dug deep enough to find the most stable underground networks. Watcher mining operations followed efficiency models. They extracted crystals using sonic fracturing that damaged the mineral structures. Their processing methods prioritized energy yield over preserving natural properties. They never considered that careless extraction might destroy potential applications. This ignorance created a critical vulnerability. Their entire control system relied on a resource they understood only partially. They built collars and weapons using technology that might hold its own countermeasures. Their arrogance blinded them to possibilities outside their narrow focus. Kane noticed the crystal's effects during their journey. His deteriorating condition seemed to stabilize near certain mineral deposits. The tremors in his hands lessened when they camped in caves with blue-green formations. Lyra observed the correlation but lacked the equipment to confirm causation. The Watchers used the crystals to power the very collar that was killing him. The irony wasn't lost on Kane. The source of his oppression might also hold the key to his survival. This paradox defined their struggle, using the Master's tools to dismantle his house. Lyra's limited understanding of Tar's work became increasingly valuable. She remembered his frustration with Watcher science protocols. They demanded reproducible results under controlled conditions. He argued that some phenomena required observational study in natural environments. The crystals represented a fundamental divide in approach. The Watchers sought to dominate and extract. Tar had wanted to understand and integrate. This philosophical difference might prove more significant than any technological advantage. Their escape route took them through old mining tunnels. Abandoned equipment lay scattered where operations had moved to richer deposits. The Watchers left behind fractured crystals they deemed inferior for energy production. These discarded fragments might hold the most interesting properties. Kane picked up a piece of crystal from the tunnel floor. It felt warm against his palm. The light it reflected seemed to dance in patterns unlike the harsh glare of Watcher technology. This discarded bit of mineral might contain possibilities its harvesters never imagined. The Watchers' weakness wasn't in their technology, but in their thinking. They believed understanding meant control. They never considered that true power might come from cooperation with natural systems, rather than domination over them. The crystals they used to enforce obedience might ultimately provide the means of liberation. Haven existed as rumor among the camps. Laborers whispered about it during night shifts. Hunters mentioned it in coded reports. The stories placed it in different mountains each time. One week it was north near the crystal mines. Next month it was east in the volcanic ranges. The shifting locations made it feel more legend than real place. This deliberate misinformation became its first defense. Marcus appeared in many of the stories. He wasn't just a leader. He represented organized opposition. Tales described him orchestrating escapes with precise timing. He knew patrol schedules and blind spots in the surveillance net. His continued freedom demonstrated the Watchers' inability to control everything. He became a symbol that resistance could be effective, not just desperate. The settlement represented more than physical safety. It offered psychological space to imagine alternatives. Inside its boundaries, people discussed rebuilding rather than just surviving. They planned for futures beyond resistance. This shift in thinking was as important as the geographical protection. The Watchers controlled through limiting possibilities. Haven expanded them. Its mountain location provided geological advantages. The rock composition interfered with scanning technology. Thermal vents masked body heat signatures. Underground water channels created sonic interference. The Watchers considered the area impassable due to these natural defenses. Their assumption became Haven's greatest security feature. Reaching the settlement required navigating treacherous terrain. Vertical cliffs demanded climbing skills most laborers didn't possess. Narrow passes forced single-file movement that left travelers exposed. Acidic springs required careful route planning. These challenges filtered out all but the most determined. The journey itself selected for those who would strengthen the community. The community operated on shared responsibility. No single person gave orders. Tasks rotated based on ability and need. Decisions came through consensus rather than command. This structure made them adaptable to unexpected threats. It also reflected their core belief. True freedom required rejecting hierarchical control in all forms. Kane had heard the rumors during his hunter years. His training included contingency plans for locating hidden settlements. The Watchers assumed Haven would follow predictable patterns. They expected centralized leadership and fixed infrastructure. Their search protocols couldn't account for a community that moved and decided collectively. The final approach to Haven required passing through a narrow canyon. Watcher drones rarely entered because of magnetic anomalies that disrupted their navigation. The rock walls showed markings from previous travelers. Scratched symbols indicated safe footholds and stable handholds. The path had been improved by countless hands over time. They found the entrance hidden behind a waterfall. The water's constant roar masked all sound. The mist created permanent interference for thermal scanners. The opening appeared as a simple crack in the rock face until you stood directly before it. The natural camouflage was perfect, visible only to those who knew exactly where to look. Inside, the caves opened into spacious chambers. Soft light came from cultivated fungi. The air smelled of damp stone and growing things. People moved with purpose but without hurry. No one carried weapons openly. The atmosphere felt different from the constant tension outside. This was more than hiding, it was living. Marcus greeted them personally. He wore simple work clothes like everyone else. His handshake felt calloused from physical labor. He asked about their journey rather than their skills. His eyes held the same weariness as theirs, but also something else. The look of someone building rather than just resisting. Haven proved that survival required creation, not just evasion. The community grew food in underground gardens. They repaired equipment using scavenged parts. Children learned reading alongside security protocols. Every aspect combined practical necessity with future planning. They weren't waiting for liberation, they were preparing to deserve it. The settlement's existence challenged the Watchers' fundamental control narrative. It demonstrated that their domination was incomplete. Somewhere in the mountains, people lived by different rules. This knowledge spread through the labor camps like quiet electricity. Hope became a tangible force carried in whispers and coded messages. Kane felt the caller's weight lessen in this space. The constant fear of surveillance faded. People looked at his hunter's armor without flinching. They saw the man beneath the weapon. This acceptance felt foreign after years of being either feared or controlled. Haven offered something he'd forgotten was possible, being seen as human. Lyra carried her husband's knowledge in a sealed pouch and her memory. Tar had been a healer before the Watchers took him. His research notebooks contained observations the occupation forces dismissed as primitive. She understood biological systems in ways their military science ignored. This knowledge became their most unexpected weapon. She recognized symbiotic relationships between plants and minerals. Certain fungi only grew near specific rock formations. Their presence indicated safe water sources underground. She could identify edible roots by the pattern of leaf growth above them. Her understanding came from observation rather than controlled experiments. The Watchers' science focused on domination and extraction. They studied how to maximize crystal energy yield. They developed more efficient neurotoxins for hunter collars. Their research served control, not understanding. They dismissed native knowledge as superstition, despite its practical effectiveness. Lyra's approach balanced their group's capabilities. Kane thought in tactical terms: threats, routes, security. Mira moved on instinctual connection to the environment. Lyra provided the scientific framework that united both perspectives. She could explain why a safe path was safe, not just that it was. She recognized patterns in crystal formations that indicated energy flows. The Watchers saw only power sources. She saw potential applications their narrow focus missed. Her husband's research suggested medicinal properties they never investigated. This blindness represented a critical vulnerability in their system. Her knowledge helped them survive day to day. She prepared poultices from purple moss that reduced inflammation. She identified berries that provided nutrition without toxicity. She found water sources where scanners showed only dry rock. These practical skills proved more valuable than any weapon. The Watchers' arrogance created their greatest weakness. They assumed technological superiority guaranteed control. They never considered that understanding might defeat technology. Their dismissal of native knowledge left them blind to possibilities outside their models. Lyra could interpret Tar's research symbols. He used medical shorthand to record observations about crystal resonance effects on tissue. His notes suggested healing properties the Watchers never explored. They were too busy turning the crystals into weapons to study their other applications. This divide in approach defined their struggle. The Watchers sought to dominate through force and technology. Lyra worked with natural systems through observation and integration. One approach created constant resistance. The other found paths through that resistance. Her knowledge provided psychological strength as well as physical survival. Understanding their environment reduced the fear of the unknown. They could predict predator movements based on plant disturbances. They could avoid toxic areas by recognizing warning signs. Knowledge replaced uncertainty with calculated risk. The Watchers monitored electronic communications and energy signatures. They never thought to watch for people reading plant patterns or rock formations. Their surveillance systems couldn't detect the transmission of practical knowledge through demonstration and memory. Lyra's legacy demonstrated that oppression often overlooks what it considers insignificant. The Watchers controlled technology and resources but missed the power of applied understanding. Their system was designed to handle rebellion, not quiet competence. True resistance required more than fighting the oppressor. It demanded understanding the world better than they did. The most powerful weapons weren't always weapons. Sometimes they were notebooks, observation skills, and the willingness to learn what your enemy considered unimportant. Knowledge became their means of navigation, healing, and ultimately their path to freedom. The constant thrum of pain became Kane's new baseline. It settled deep in his bones, a low electric burn that hummed through his nervous system. His enhanced metabolism fought the toxin, but the effort only spread it further. His body's attempt to heal was hastening his destruction. Each hour brought a new symptom. A fine tremor started in his left hand. His vision blurred at the edges, making distant shapes swim. His hearing sharpened painfully. Every rustle of leaves sounded like a crashing boulder. The sensory overload made the world feel raw and overwhelming. The poison wasn't just killing him. It was rewiring his perception of reality. The pain became his personal countdown clock. He knew the sequence from Watcher training manuals. Tremors led to muscle spasms. Blurred vision preceded retinal detachment. The final stages involved systemic organ failure. He had maybe a week before complete shutdown. The knowledge forced a brutal efficiency into his planning. Every action had to matter. His declining physical state eliminated brute force options. He couldn't outrun patrols or fight raptors head-on anymore. Survival required smarter tactics, ambushes instead of confrontations, misdirection instead of speed. He used terrain features he would have overlooked when at full strength. Weakness sharpened his strategic thinking. Mira's trust became his psychological anchor. Her simple belief in his goodness countered the physical agony. When the tremors made his hands shake, she would place her small green fingers over his. The gesture didn't stop the shaking, but it reminded him why he was enduring it. Her faith felt like a weight and a lifeline simultaneously. Lyra's medical knowledge provided temporary relief, but no cure. She prepared poultices from purple moss that reduced inflammation for a few hours. She identified roots that eased the muscle spasms. Her treatments were battlefield medicine, managing symptoms without addressing the cause. They bought time, but not enough. The Watchers designed the toxin to eliminate hope along with biological function. They understood that despair was more effective than pain alone. The constant physical decline was meant to prove resistance was pointless. Every tremor was supposed to whisper that obedience was the only rational choice. They built the perfect system for breaking ordinary men. Kane transformed their countdown into his own timeline. He stopped measuring time in days until death and started measuring it in tasks completed. How many patrols could he evade before the blurred vision worsened? How much ground could they cover before the tremors became debilitating? The poison became a scheduling tool rather than a death sentence. His body's failure forced a new economy of movement. He conserved energy for critical moments. He planned routes with multiple rest points. He delegated tasks to Lyra and Mira that he would have handled alone weeks before. The physical decline created a more distributed, sustainable resistance. The burning in his veins became a constant reminder of his choice. Every throb echoed his decision to twist the collar's catch. The pain was the physical manifestation of his reclaimed autonomy. He wore it not as a punishment, but as evidence he was no longer their weapon. Mira sometimes watched him when the tremors were bad. Her large eyes held concern but not pity. She seemed to understand his suffering was part of something larger. Her quiet presence during his worst moments felt like absolution. She never looked away from what the poison was doing to him. Lyra monitored his decline with clinical detachment. She tracked symptom progression against their travel rate. Her calm assessment provided stability when his body was betraying him. She never promised false hope, only practical solutions for each new challenge. Her honesty became another form of medicine. The poison's progression created a strange clarity. With his physical capabilities diminishing, his purpose sharpened. Every step toward haven became an act of defiance. Each painful breath was a rejection of the Watcher's control. His failing body was proving their most fundamental assumption wrong, that survival instinct would always dominate. He was demonstrating that some things were worth dying for, and that realization made him more dangerous than any enhancement ever could. The waterfall's roar filled the canyon like constant thunder. It masked all sound but created its own problem. The heavy mist reflected heat signatures. Any patrol would see their thermal outlines from a distance. Kane studied the terrain with tactical precision. He needed to use the environment against their pursuers. His plan required perfect misdirection. He scraped his boot against a rock, leaving a clear print angled toward the waterfall. He snapped a branch at waist height. The signs needed to be obvious enough to follow, but not so staged as to trigger suspicion. He was using his hunter training against his former masters, turning their own protocols into weaknesses. He handed Lyra his combat knife. The blade felt cold in her hands. It wasn't just a tool. It represented transferred responsibility. He was entrusting their survival to her skills instead of his own. The gesture acknowledged his deteriorating condition and her growing capability. She accepted it without ceremony, understanding the weight of what he was giving her. Mira gripped his arm. Her small fingers pressed against the damp fabric of his sleeve. "Come with us," she said. The plea cut deeper than any physical pain. Her trust had brought him this far. Now he had to reject that connection to save her. The choice required denying not just watcher control but human bonds. He shook his head. "They'll follow the strongest signal. That has to be me." His voice sounded rough over the waterfall's constant rumble. The calculation was mathematical, not emotional. 1 life diverted equaled 2 lives saved. The equation offered no alternatives, no negotiated outcomes. The sacrifice wasn't about heroism. It was about accepting certain death to create probable survival for others. Kane's body was already failing from the collar's poison. His remaining time had limited strategic value. Using it to guarantee their escape was the most efficient application of diminishing resources. He turned toward the waterfall. The mist settled on his armor like fine rain. His thermal signature would shine like a beacon to any scanning technology. He became exactly what the Watchers expected, a fleeing fugitive following predictable escape routes. Their assumptions about human behavior became the trap he was setting for them. Lyra took Mira's hand and moved toward the canyon's narrow exit. They would use a different path, one hidden behind rock formations that blocked thermal scans. Their progress would be slower but undetectable. Kane's diversion would draw attention away from their real route. He watched them disappear into the shadowed rocks. Their absence left a hollow feeling beneath the physical pain. The isolation felt different now, chosen rather than imposed. This final separation was his decision, not the Watchers. He moved closer to the waterfall's pounding curtain. The sound vibration traveled through his boots into his bones. The mist soaked through his clothing, chilling his skin. He positioned himself where the thermal reflection would be strongest. He was painting a perfect target on himself. The Watchers' pursuit patterns were predictable. They would converge on the strongest energy signature first. Their tactical approach favored overwhelming the primary threat, before searching for secondary targets. Kane's plan exploited this systematic thinking. He checked his remaining weapons. The stun rod had enough charge for 1 full discharge. His armored vest could stop most projectile rounds. These resources would help him maintain the diversion longer. Every minute he kept their attention increased Lyra and Mira's chances. The first drone appeared over the canyon rim. Its red scanning beam swept through the mist. Kane stood perfectly still, letting the technology register his presence. The drone hovered, confirming the sighting before signaling others. The hunt was beginning exactly as planned. He raised his weapon not to fight but to confirm the threat assessment. The Watchers would see an armed fugitive preparing to make a stand. They would commit resources to neutralizing him. Their response would be thorough, methodical, and completely focused on the wrong target. The thunder of the waterfall drowned out the approaching hovercraft. Kane felt the vibration through his boots as more drones arrived. He had become the perfect distraction, visible, dangerous, and exactly where they expected him to be. Sometimes victory required becoming what your enemy anticipated, while the real victory slipped away unnoticed. The Watchers came with calculated efficiency. 3 hovercraft formed a triangle around his position. Their weapons hummed with charging energy. Red targeting beams converged on his chest. Their approach followed standard containment protocol: overwhelm the target through coordinated pressure. They expected either surrender or desperate resistance. Kane moved backward toward the ravine edge. His steps were deliberate, not panicked. He kept his hands visible, no weapon raised. The posture suggested resignation rather than fight. This fit their behavioral models for captured fugitives. They advanced with confidence, their systems predicting his next movements based on previous escape attempts. The ground near the ravine was unstable. Underground springs had weakened the rock structure. Kane had noted the fissures during his earlier assessment. His retreat led them onto the most fragile section. Their weight distribution calculations didn't account for geological variables. They saw terrain as backdrop, not active participant. His heel touched the crumbling edge. The watchers closed their triangle formation. Their sensors focused on his biological readings, not the ground beneath them. The rock groaned with shifting weight. One craft adjusted position, its thrusters vibrating the unstable surface. That was the trigger. The collapse happened faster than human reaction time. The ledge shattered into falling debris. Kane dropped with the crumbling rock. His body turned in the air, arms spread. The hovercraft scrambled to maintain position above the collapsing ravine. Their systems prioritized stability over pursuit. His descent felt both instantaneous and eternal. The rushing air carried echoes of another life. He smelled rain on dry earth, felt small fingers grasping his, heard a child's laughter mixing with the wind's roar. These were uncorrupted memories surfacing through chemical conditioning and physical trauma. The Watchers' enhancements couldn't touch these moments. The ravine depth exceeded their scanning capabilities. Their sensors lost tracking at 50 meters. Kane fell through that threshold into informational darkness. Their systems registered target loss but couldn't confirm termination. The uncertainty created a data gap their protocols couldn't resolve. They recovered his body hours later. The impact damage was extensive but recognizable. Their medical drones performed standard autopsy procedures. They expected to study neural patterns of failed resistance. Their focus remained on understanding deviation from programmed behavior. The examination revealed cellular anomalies. Incomplete toxin dispersion suggested partial collar deactivation. Unusual regeneration patterns appeared in tissue samples. These findings didn't match any known physiological models. Their systems categorized the data for later analysis rather than immediate action. The Watchers' autopsy protocols were designed for predictable outcomes. They could analyze death by neurotoxin or trauma. They couldn't process unexpected biological adaptation. Their scientific paradigm had no category for what they found. The anomalies were filed as curiosities rather than threats. Kane's falling body became a final data point in their human behavior studies. They interpreted his actions as failed escape attempt. Their reports concluded with standard recommendations for improved collar security. They missed the strategic victory hidden within apparent defeat. The information gap created by the deep ravine worked as intended. Their systems showed mission completion, target neutralized. They never considered he might have achieved exactly what he planned. Their assumptions about human behavior prevented them from recognizing calculated sacrifice. Even in death, Kane delivered unexpected data. The cellular regeneration patterns suggested vulnerabilities in their control systems. His body became a message they couldn't decipher. The Watchers maintained their certainty while overlooking the anomalies that would eventually undermine it. The autopsy revealed something the Watchers never expected. Kane's cellular structure showed clear signs of regeneration, actively fighting the toxin's effects. This wasn't part of his enhancement package. Their scientists had designed his biology for obedience, not resistance. The discovery challenged their fundamental understanding of human physiology. The regeneration patterns correlated with blue crystal exposure during his journey. Microscopic crystal fragments lodged in his tissues emitted low-level energy frequencies. These emissions stimulated cellular repair mechanisms the Watchers never knew existed. Their research had focused solely on the crystal's power potential, ignoring biological interactions. Watcher scientists dismissed the findings as anomaly. Their classification systems had no category for unexpected biological adaptation. They filed the data for later review, rather than initiating immediate investigation. This procedural response reflected their broader weakness, prioritizing control over curiosity. The chief physician's report stated the regeneration was impossible by our understanding of human physiology. This admission revealed their scientific arrogance. Instead of questioning their models, they dismissed what didn't fit. Their certainty became their blindness. The cellular activity suggested Kane's body had been fighting the poison for days. His enhanced metabolism, combined with crystal exposure, created a defensive response the collar wasn't designed to handle. The Watcher's systems assumed biological functions would follow predictable degradation patterns. This oversight represented a critical vulnerability. Their entire control system relied on understanding human physiology, better than humans did themselves. The regeneration proved they knew less than they believed. Their science served domination rather than discovery. The data indicated incomplete toxin dispersion. Some neurotoxins had been neutralized before reaching critical systems. This explained why Kane lasted longer than predicted after disabling his collar. His body wasn't just enduring the poison, it was actively resisting it. Watcher research protocols weren't designed to investigate spontaneous healing. Their experiments focused on causing damage, not understanding recovery. This bias prevented them from recognizing the significance of what they observed. They studied how to break things, not how they might repair themselves. The autopsy team followed standard procedures for failed escapees. They expected to document predictable death patterns. Instead, they found evidence of biological processes outside their models. Their training didn't include flexibility when encountering the unexpected. The regeneration mystery suggested broader possibilities. If one hunter could develop resistance, others might too. The Watchers' control systems assumed universal vulnerability to their methods. This anomaly hinted at potential weaknesses in their entire approach. Their dismissal of the findings followed established patterns. Unclassifiable data went to archival storage rather than triggering protocol revisions. This maintained their sense of control while creating information blind spots. They preferred organized ignorance to disruptive knowledge. The cellular evidence indicated Kane's body had been changing throughout his journey. His exposure to alien environments, crystal emissions, and stress conditions triggered adaptations their laboratory models couldn't predict. Real-world variables produced results their controlled experiments missed. This blindness to emergent properties became their strategic weakness. They focused on what they could measure and control, missing what they couldn't categorize. The most important discovery wasn't the regeneration itself, but their failure to recognize its significance. Sometimes the greatest threat isn't what your enemy knows, but what they overlook because it doesn't fit their worldview. The Watchers maintained perfect records of everything that confirmed their assumptions while missing the anomalies that could undo them. Their systems were designed to preserve control, not to learn. Marcus met them at the cave entrance. His handshake felt calloused and firm. He didn't offer sympathy or questions about their journey. His first words were about work assignments. "The medical bay needs your knowledge," he told Lyra. "We've got people with crystal exposure symptoms." The welcome wasn't about refuge, it was about contribution. The cave system revealed careful planning. Chambers were carved with specific purposes. Living quarters had ventilation shafts that doubled as escape routes. Storage areas were positioned near natural cooling vents. The communal space featured raised seating that allowed clear sight lines to all entrances. Every design choice served multiple functions. Lyra went to the medical bay immediately. The space was organized with military precision. Shelves held labeled containers of herbs and processed minerals. A sterilization unit hummed in one corner. Patients rested on woven mats that allowed air circulation. Her knowledge found instant application. She identified a mislabeled route that was causing adverse reactions. Mira's connection to the environment became an asset. She could predict weather changes by reading fungal growth patterns. She knew which insects indicated safe water sources. The community valued her insights instead of fearing her differences. Children followed her through the tunnels, learning to read natural signs they'd previously overlooked. Their arrival brought new capabilities. Lyra's understanding of alien biology improved medical treatments. Mira's environmental knowledge enhanced their survival strategies. Even Kane's tactical experience relayed through Lyra improved their security protocols. Each skill filled gaps in the community's existing knowledge base. Decision-making happened through community meetings. Everyone could speak, but everyone had to listen. Proposals required general agreement rather than majority vote. This process took longer but created stronger commitment to outcomes. People followed plans they helped create rather than orders they were forced to obey. The structure proved adaptable during a cave-in crisis. When a tunnel collapsed during a storm, people organized without waiting for instructions. Some cleared debris while others reinforced adjacent passages. Medical teams prepared for injuries that never came because prevention worked. The response demonstrated their collective capability. True sanctuary meant more than physical safety. It involved creating something worth defending. Gardens grew in carefully tended chambers. Children learned reading alongside security drills. Art decorated functional spaces without compromising their purpose. The community was building a future, not just hiding from the present. Resources were distributed based on need and contribution. Those who worked more didn't eat better. They ensured others ate adequately. The system encouraged sharing rather than hoarding. This approach built trust that hierarchical systems couldn't match. People supported each other because their survival was interconnected. The Watchers believed control required clear chains of command. Haven demonstrated that resilience came from distributed intelligence. No single person knew everything, but together they knew enough. This made them resistant to disruption. Losing one person didn't cripple the community, like losing a commander would cripple a Watcher unit. Security relied on observation and subtlety rather than force. Lookouts used natural formations for concealment. Communication happened through light signals and bird calls. Their defenses blended with the environment instead of opposing it. This approach required constant attention but left minimal traces. The community remembered why they were there. Stories of resistance were shared during evening meals. Lessons from failed escapes informed current strategies. This collective memory helped them avoid repeating mistakes. It also reinforced their purpose beyond mere survival. Haven proved that true freedom required building alternatives, not just resisting oppression. Their community demonstrated that different ways of living were possible. This knowledge spread slowly through the labor camps, becoming as dangerous to the Watchers as any weapon. The most revolutionary act wasn't fighting the system. It was building something better beside it. Mira carried the photograph in a sealed pouch against her chest. The metal disc felt warm through the fabric. She sometimes took it out at night, holding it under the faint glow of Haven's fungal lights. The image showed two figures against a bright blue sky, a woman with dark hair and a small child with familiar eyes. This was Earth, a place she knew only through stories. The photograph represented a history before collars and Watchers. It showed a time when humans lived without engineered obedience. The woman's smile held no fear. The child's eyes held no caution. This artifact proved that their current reality wasn't always this way. Resistance wasn't just about fighting what existed. It was about remembering what had been lost. She vowed to remember Kane as he was before his capture. Not the enhanced hunter, but the man who carried this image through hell. His final choice proved that the Watcher's programming couldn't erase core humanity. The photograph became his true legacy, more than any tactical decision or combat skill. Lyra helped her understand the image's significance. She had never seen Earth's blue skies or green grass, but she recognized universal human bonds. The way the woman's hand rested on the child's shoulder. The particular tilt of the head that suggested affection. These nonverbal cues crossed species and planetary boundaries. The photograph became a teaching tool in Haven. Mira showed it to other children during history lessons. They traced the figures with small fingers, asking about the strange light source and unfamiliar colors. The image made abstract concepts concrete. Freedom wasn't just an idea. It was blue skies and unguarded smiles. Its survival through countless missions made it a relic of persistence. Kane had carried it through hunter training, combat missions, and his final escape attempt. The metal disc bore scratches from rough handling and moisture damage from river crossings. Each mark represented a moment it could have been lost but wasn't. The children treated it with reverence. They understood its value without needing explanations. When Mira brought it out, they gathered quietly instead of their usual noise. They seemed to recognize that this object connected them to something larger than their underground existence. Lyra used it to explain human biology. She pointed to the sky's blue color when discussing oxygen-rich atmospheres. She noted the green plants when teaching about photosynthetic life. The photograph became a bridge between their current reality and biological possibilities. It helped them imagine ecosystems beyond the purple forests. Mira sometimes woke from nightmares of Kane's fall. She would reach for the photograph, feeling its solid presence. The cool metal grounded her in reality. It reminded her that his sacrifice had purpose. His death wasn't an ending, but a transfer of responsibility. The image's power grew with each viewing. It wasn't just a picture, it was evidence. Proof that the Watchers hadn't always controlled everything. Proof that other ways of living were possible. This knowledge became more dangerous to their oppressors than any weapon. Small objects often carry the heaviest meanings. A simple photograph can hold entire worlds within its frame. It can represent lost families, forgotten freedoms, and future possibilities. Sometimes the most revolutionary act is remembering what others want you to forget. Preservation becomes resistance when the preserved thing represents everything they tried to destroy. Lyra chose a quiet chamber where blue moss grew in soft patterns on the walls. She stood with Mira in the dim light. Kane's body remained unrecovered, but his presence felt tangible in the space between them. The ritual wasn't about the physical remains. It was about acknowledging the transformation that had already occurred. She spoke the traditional Naru phrases with careful precision. From darkness to light, she began, her voice steady. From separation to unity. The words echoed softly in the stone chamber. Mira watched her with wide eyes, her small hand clutching the photograph. This ceremony bridged two cultures honoring the same sacrifice. The phrases framed his death not as an end, but as a continuation. Your journey ends, your transformation begins. This was the Naru belief, that energy returned to the world's soul, becoming part of everything. Lyra adapted the tradition for a human context, blending alien wisdom with human loss. The synthesis felt natural, necessary. Mira listened without crying. Her small face showed concentration rather than grief. The ritual provided structure for processing what felt too large to hold. It gave her a way to understand Kane's choice without being crushed by it. The ceremony created meaning where the Watchers offered only control. Lyra completed the final phrase. Be at peace, Kane of Earth, be free. The words hung in the air like mist. They acknowledged his journey from weapon to human being. The ritual celebrated his reclamation of self, despite the systems designed to erase it. This was resistance through remembrance. The act provided closure without pretending the struggle was over. It honored his sacrifice while recognizing their ongoing fight. The ceremony created a moment of stillness amid constant danger. It affirmed that some things remained beyond Watcher control. Dignity, memory, the right to grieve properly. Mira placed the photograph on a flat stone. The image of Kane's family seemed to watch over the ceremony. This simple object represented everything they were fighting for: connection, history, the right to remember. The ritual made space for both loss and hope to coexist. Lyra's actions demonstrated that survival required more than physical safety. It needed rituals that preserved humanity amid brutality. The words helped transform raw grief into purposeful memory. They turned Kane's death from a tactical event into a spiritual transition. The Naru tradition viewed death as merging with the world's soul. This perspective offered comfort different from human ideas of endings. It suggested that energy continued in new forms rather than disappearing. This belief helped Lyra explain things she couldn't change. The ceremony lasted only minutes, but its effects lingered. Mira stood straighter afterward. Her grip on the photograph relaxed slightly. The ritual had given her a way to carry the loss without being crushed by it. She could remember Kane without being paralyzed by grief. Lyra's words created a container for their collective pain. They acknowledged the price of resistance while affirming its necessity. The ritual wasn't about moving on. It was about moving forward with the weight properly distributed. It allowed them to honor the past without being trapped by it. In the Watcher's world, everything served control. Their systems eliminated anything that didn't enhance efficiency. Ritual had no place in their calculated existence. This made ceremonies like Lyra's profoundly subversive. They reclaimed space for things that couldn't be measured or controlled. The quiet words in the moss-lit chamber represented a different kind of power. Not force or technology, but the simple act of bearing witness, of saying that some losses mattered enough to mark properly, that some transformations deserved recognition even without bodies to bury. Sometimes the strongest resistance isn't fighting what exists, but preserving what they try to eliminate. Dignity, memory, the right to say goodbye in your own way. These quiet acts of preservation become the foundation for everything that comes after. Kane's story spread through covert networks, like underground water. Laborers whispered it during night shifts. Hunters relayed coded fragments during patrol changes. His choice to disable the collar became a mathematical proof. Even their most controlled weapon could turn against them. The act demonstrated that punishment and reward weren't absolute motivators. Some values outweighed self-preservation. The regeneration anomaly suggested biological possibilities the Watchers couldn't control. Their autopsy reports noted cellular activity that defied their models. Instead of investigating, they filed the data as curiosities. This dismissal reflected their broader weakness, prioritizing control over understanding. Their system assumed human physiology followed predictable patterns. Mira became the keeper of his legacy. Her small size made her invisible to Watcher threat assessments. She carried the photograph and the story. Children gathered around her in Haven's tunnels, tracing the image of Earth's blue sky with small fingers. Her youth made the message more powerful. If a child could understand sacrifice, so could adults. Lyra's knowledge combined with Marcus's leadership to create new strategies. She understood alien biology in ways military science ignored. He knew how to organize resistance without centralized command. Together they developed tactics that used the environment against the Watchers. Their cooperation created a more adaptable opposition. The ancient markers suggested broader networks of resistance. The carved symbols indicated organized opposition predated human arrival. This discovery changed their psychological framework. They weren't starting a revolution. They were joining one already in progress. The markers provided both physical guidance and historical context. The Watchers' inability to recognize Kane's adaptation became their critical vulnerability. Their systems categorized the cellular anomalies for later study. They maintained their assumption of control while evidence mounted against it. This blindness to emerging threats defined their approach. They preferred predictable failures to unexpected possibilities. Their entire system assumed human behavior followed punishment-reward patterns. Kane's choice proved otherwise. His sacrifice created a ripple effect through the control structure. One unpredictable act demonstrated that their models were incomplete. Perfection in control systems creates fragility when confronted with the imperfectly human. Mira's vow to remember ensured his legacy would endure. She would tell others how one man's choice sparked change. This act of preservation became as important as any combat tactic. Memory became a weapon against enforced forgetting. The photograph served as tangible proof of what they were fighting for. The spark spread through small, deliberate actions. A laborer might sabotage equipment after hearing the story. A hunter might look away from a fleeing native. These individual choices accumulated into systemic weakness. The Watchers could track overt rebellion, but not this quiet corrosion of compliance. Lyra and Marcus used the ancient markers to expand their network. They found other groups following the same symbols. The resistance grew through connection rather than conquest. This decentralized structure proved more resilient than hierarchical control. It adapted to local conditions without central direction. The Watchers continued their patrols and scans. They maintained perfect records of everything that confirmed their assumptions. They missed the anomalies that mattered. Their certainty became their Achilles heel. They were watching for explosions while the foundation eroded beneath them. Sometimes revolution begins not with a battle cry, but with a quiet choice. One man deciding that some things are worth dying for. That spark ignites others. It proves control is an illusion maintained by consent. Withdraw that consent and the most perfect system crumbles from within. The child's simple trust did what the collar's 12 toxins could not. Her plea reached past the conditioning, past the augmentations to the man the Watchers thought they'd erased. Kane chose certainty of death over certainty of moral failure. He reclaimed his humanity with the twist of a catch. True freedom isn't the absence of chains. It's the choice of who you become despite what they tried to make you. His fall became their failing. Let me know which part of his transformation hit hardest for you down in the comments.